and welcome to London. Here we are at the ExCel Arena in London for the 6th leg of 8 in this fascinating, scintillating, electrifying 2022-23 season. It's the first time we've had a full season for a couple of years because of the pandemic, and we are now well over halfway. There's the lineup and there's the qualification standings so far. Boyd ExCel, no surprise at this stage in the season, is way ahead in terms of ranking. IJsbrand Chardon, his rival for many years, has been driving out of his skin this year, and he is lying in second place. Michael Bruckler, the marathon specialist from Germany, here he is in third place. 6 of these drivers will be going forward to the final in Bordeaux. So our line-up today: Benjamin Elod, he is representing France. The running order today, that comes from our prelim round yesterday. Second to go will be Daniel Naprouz. Dan Naprouz, who is also here with his stunt team, the Devil's Horsemen. He is the wildcard entry representing the home nation, Great Britain. Third to go for America, Chester Webber, multiple medalist at all sorts of events for many years. Bram Chardon, fresh from his victory in Geneva last weekend. He'll be going next. We then have Koos de Ronde, Dries de Greek, and the man himself, Boyd ExCel. So the course designed for the 5th time this series by the Dutchman Jeroen Houteman, and each time we have a course he asks different questions. Each arena has a very different dimension, has a different feel, and Jeroen himself says he designs these courses by feel. The standard is we have up to 12 or 13 obstacles that they go through, and 2 of them are going through these marathon style obstacles. So up and down this arena, across the diagonal. Now this is a great graphic because you can see we've got some speedy bits over the bridge, back through, but it is really tight coming into the first of what we call the marathon style obstacles. Suddenly you're asking the horses to come back, curling back on themselves. This is just one route. The drivers may well have made a different decision. They don't have long, only about 15 minutes to walk the course, and they're doing it with their teams, the 2 backsteppers on the back, through the F gates. Background, lots of changes of rain. Don't forget, each time they knock a ball or they knock an element, it's another 4 seconds to add. Up and down the arena and into number 8. So today in London, number 8 is going to be the 2nd marathon style obstacle. A, B, C, D, E and F for the first round. Don't forget, the best 3 drivers, the fastest 3 drivers, the drivers with the lowest penalty score. They might be fast, but they could clock up the penalties with knocking over those balls. They will go through to the drive-through, and there we go, up and down the arena. We need fit horses, we need athletic horses, we need obedient horses, and most of all, we need teamwork to make this brilliant, electrifying sport come off. Just look at those graphics, up and down, and all those curves and turns. And that is going to be done with the driver holding some reins in his hands, communicating brilliantly through voice, through feel, through instinct, through talent with his horses. There we have the course. Will look very different in person, but at the moment the arena looks fantastic. Just shy of 80 meters long, just about 35 meters wide, here on a sand and fiber surface. Even the different surfaces in the different legs do make a difference. So we started in Lyon. There we go, Chester Webber just warming up his team of Lipizzaner. So that's Chester Webber, who we've got a great shot of the collector in. Bram Chardon in his green turnout there with another team of grey Lipizzaners. Now yesterday in the prelim round, he had a younger horse in the front just as a first warm-up event for it, but today he brings his A team, that team that was so electrifying in Geneva last weekend. He absolutely nailed it. Said he made a couple of mistakes, said he missed a couple of loops, held his hands up and said his first drive of the season. Unusual for Bram to start quite so late in the season, but as he said, logistically he is running his competitive season alongside his dad IJsbrand. So there we have it, coming into this wonderful arena at ExCel. Don't forget, for many years, this iconic show, this Christmas show, started off as a summer show, Olympia, back in the annals of the early 20th century. It moved to ExCel from those hallowed halls of Olympia in West Kensington. And first to go, he will be setting the pace for France. It's Benjamin Elot. So on we go. Benjamin with his team of Lusitanos, Fez, Fruto, Famso, Fiasco. The two horses at the back, known as the Wheelers, they are the power. Now, this is where you gain some early seconds. He is belting down that arena, those horses working so well, listening, raising their aim game. First time over the bridge, get it straight. It's quite narrow, although the bridge is wide. Those cones, those obstacles are between about 1.9 to 2 meters wide. And there he is, just anchoring up a little bit, coming into that first of obstacles. Now, what you're asking to do is, this is where the schooling and the training comes into place. These horses have to be so agile. We've asked them to sprint, and now we're asking them to bounce, to be obedient. He is mainly driving his lead horses. Those are the ones, but he has to also oppose his wheelers. He has to make sure that they don't fall in behind. And this is where some of the technical aspects of the driven turnout come out. Don't forget, all that we do in driving is based on tradition. This is a very, very modern, this is the Formula One of driving. But a horse pulling a carriage, or a combination of horses pulling up a carriage, this is what civilization was built on. Now, he comes out and he has got no penalties to add so far. So this is a much cleaner drive than yesterday from Benjamin, who is a wonderful horse trainer. Oh, yes, now that is first lot of penalties for Benjamin. Must have knocked 2, so that's 8 to add. So he will be wanting to keep up on time. Those 4 seconds. In the World Cup Series, the penalties are awarded differently indoors and outdoors, but here it is 4 seconds per ball or per element knocked. There's all sorts of other penalties you can get for going wrong or knocking over things that you have or haven't been through. And even if you've cleared a gate or cleared an obstacle and you still knock the ball over, that can be expensive. So the idea is to go clear, knock as few balls off as possible. And there we go. Look at those leaders. You have various points of articulation here in this 4 in hand. We reckon between about 24 and 30 feet long altogether. There's a lot of horse and a lot of carriage to get through. I see the graphics have just changed. It was 1 ball down over the bridge. So this benchmark for the first round from Benjamin with his team of Lusitanos. This is a new team of horses to him. For the last few years, he's been driving his beautiful, magnificent Arabo-Frisians, and for this year, he has just brought out this new team of Portuguese horses, and off he goes. The horse is still fresh and full of running. So that is a good benchmark. So the total is 170.51. So the time, 166.51. So remember the time, although his total score has that 4 added, only 4 to add. So pretty good from Benjamin. So 170.51. So that gives us an idea of the speed and perhaps some of the bogey points on the course. And what is really interesting is how tight some of the pairs of the cones are next to those obstacles. You think you might have a nice swing round into A. Don't forget, you must drive these gates in sequence. If you don't, and you don't correct your course, you are eliminated. You must drive them in sequence. And coming into the arena with a big cheer, this is our own British Dan Naproos. Dan, who has been a multiple national champion for Great Britain. He and his sister Camilla run the Devil's Horseman, and the films that Dan hasn't appeared in himself, he's been Darth Vader in Rogue One. They were the horsemen for Game of Thrones. How could you not be fascinated by what they do in the horse world? And Dan learned so much from his father Gerard Naproos, who is a tremendous horseman and one of our big characters. And off Dan goes. Now, he's got big scopy horses here. He's got 2 warm bloods in front and 2 Lipizzaners behind. These horses are also working horses. He uses them on the film jobs. And Dan is such an experienced horseman. He can train pretty much a horse to do anything. If you think of all the black horses on certain adverts you see on television, that's Dan and his family and his team behind him. On the back, he has Frank Campbell. Now, Frank himself is a very successful competitor and trainer. He's represented Great Britain many times, most notably with horse pairs. And then Oliver Bass with Dan, and Oliver is down at the bottom. And now that is a really important position to be in. You are shifting the weight, you are changing the balance, you are keeping the center of gravity low. Don't forget, you're turning so quickly with these carriages and horses, and it's really important that the weight is kept low. Back in the old days when we were still using traditional carriages to do this job, the fast job that started off with the likes of Prince Philip and all these great names when driving became an FEI sport and we were using the antique wooden carriages, we had none of the technical prowess that we have nowadays with the harness, and it's all there to help the horse perform well. But look at these horses working so well together as a team. All Dan has coming back into his hands are those leather reins, and so the skill and the trust, everything that has brought them to this point to get them to work at maximum level. Now, this is the first time Dan has competed this season, so he's a little bit of a disadvantage. All the other drivers that are competing as qualified drivers, it's the top 10 from the preceding outdoor season. Those are the guys and girls that get here. We would normally have Marika Harm, oh, that's just gone, so that is 4 to add in the obstacle for Dan, but he's having a great round so far. He himself said yesterday he was a little bit rusty, but the turnouts and the athletes that compete here, they have done very well in the outdoor season. So we have the top 10. We should have Marika Harm, but she's actually just about to have a baby, so she's not here, and that gave Dries de Greek from Belgium his qualifying slot. So Dan is here in his wildcard capacity, and you can just see him calling there to the horses. And if you're going to knock something, knock it. So that's 12 to add. That's pretty decisive for our team on the ground. We have our FEI stewards and our judges. Bert Jambon from Belgium is overseeing the judges, and so that's going to be 12 to add for Dan. But his time is looking pretty good. 1:58.73 for a time, so very impressive time. Don't forget that even though all these drivers were in here yesterday in the prelim round, this is something where the show at London is a little bit unique. We do have this extra round, so they're run over 3 days, which is brilliant for the audience here, and we had a packed house opening games Thursday evening. And Dan said himself he's a little bit rusty. He's come here as a wild card. He would dearly love to be part of that international top 10, but his horse is doing brilliantly. They're coming in fresh to it. So think of Dan and his colleagues at the Devil's Horseman next time you're watching Game of Thrones on a rerun, or Rogue One when he was dressed up as Darth Vader. Now next in with another grey team, this is Chester Webber. And Chester, who has a very transatlantic lifestyle. He is based in Ocala in Florida, right in the heart of horse country. And we caught up with him in Geneva, had a fascinating chat to him, and he was telling us about the sheer logistics of the nutrition of keeping his horses, and his mother has quite a famous racehorse breeding program as well, and they have to get hay into Florida by train from places like Nevada, where it's much higher altitude, because Florida grass doesn't grow suitable hay for these level of horses. So absolutely fascinating. And then Chester, logistically, is somebody that logistics are quite big for, because he has to get his horses over here. So he had a very successful outdoor season. He started in Royal Windsor in May with his team of very athletic bay warm bloods. Here for the indoor season, he qualified. It's the first time for a couple of seasons he's been on the circuit on this winter series, and he's got this wonderful team of Lipizzaners. They're pingy, powerful horses, very bright, can be quite hot temperamentally, and they are based for this season with Bram and IJsbrand Chardon. And they've all had a bit of a look, whether it's Big Ben they're spooking out, waiting for it to go ding-dong, but over the bridge. So twice over the bridge, you get that wonderful atmospheric clatter. You've got those 16 shod feet to all these horses. The farrier, very important part of the driven turnout. No foot, no horse, we always say, and so it's absolutely important, not only in the training, but keeping these horses sound, making sure they're shod sufficiently in time before these sorts of events to make sure the shoes are bedded in properly and they're happy. And you might be using slightly different shoes and studs on this sort of surface than you would in training on the roads, or taking them out onto grass surfaces like we had during the season. But Chester, he had a bit of a mixed round in Geneva, and then coming out, that is a tight angle, but he's felt much sharper here in London, got his eye and his horses in. This season is always building up, and you can tell somebody like Boyd, who's had more competition practice than anyone this year, his horses are as sharp as they can be. So each round is a learning curve. And this is a tricky entrance into this obstacle, because you've got to really avoid that other pair of cones there. You knock them and you're going to have another 4 penalties added. If you haven't been through an obstacle or a set of cones beforehand and you knock them, then the bell rings and it has to be rebuilt, and that's another 10 to add. So you just need to be going for precision, for the tight lines. These points of articulation, you can turn the leaders, you keep the wheelers' heads, those 2 horses behind, slightly outside. They've got that pole going up the middle, so they don't have quite the flexibility and the bends in their bodies that those lead horses do. But this is Chester, he's really on it. And encourage them. Oh, he's got his game face on, teeth gritted, just getting them down there through that bottom cone. And a vast improvement on yesterday. Wow, Chester, he is really putting himself in the mix here. No penalties to add so far. So that is first round from Benjamin, that is still standing 170.51, no doubt at all. We will have some much faster rounds than that, but Chester means business today. He's used all his match practice back through number 12, and just 4 to add. So 154.44. So the time 154.44, much faster than the others, knocking off over 10 seconds on the first round, and then another 4 to add. So he is 158.44. Will that be enough to put him into the drive-off? On some of the legs we've had so far this series, on day 1, on this competition 1 as we call it, all the drivers have come forward. Because we have this extra prelim round, we feel that this time we will just have the top 3 drivers coming forward on both rounds, days 1 and 2. So greys are in today, and here we have Bram Chardon. Yesterday, he was driving a younger horse, a 6-year-old horse, in the lead. He came for a bit of experience, absolutely ideal format to do it. There's a lot for these horses to take in. What a sharp learning curve, big audience, different arenas, busy warm-up zone out there. You've got 7 teams vying for space in a very small area. And so what better place to bring out a fresh horse than Bram did yesterday. But he is back today with his Geneva team. And you can just see from some of the names there, the Favre and Maestoso, very famous prefixes in the Lipizzaner. Physical and temperamental characteristics of these horses, what suits for the outdoor job when you've got a combination of dressage, marathon and cones. You've got 3 very distinct disciplines. Here you're condensing it all into one. You want that agility, and you want to be able to have really supple, flexible, obedient horses that goes across the board. But most of all, we want horses that can sprint, and look at them go. Happy horses. A horse is a herd animal. It loves to work with its mate, and this is one of the best things a horse can do, is to be working with its mate. They have a lot of freedom out there in a carriage. You'll quite often find that a horse that doesn't enjoy being ridden will really enjoy being driven. Relative freedom out there, and they enjoy this job. This is as good as it gets in terms of horses, and they are top athletes. I mentioned earlier the nutrition that goes into it, the shoeing, the veterinary stuff. A lot of these guys have water training. They work in water treadmills as well. They'll be working on roads and tracks, just like a peak athlete. And you can't just pull them out of the field and bring them here. There are months and months of planning. And this is why Bram was saying that he's launched his bid to retain his crown, the one that he took in Leipzig earlier on this year, when we had that bumper 4 World Cups in over one weekend in Leipzig in Germany. Absolutely brilliant event, and Bram was the winner. He is our reigning World Cup champion, and he is really keen to win again. He knows that it's not going to be easy. Boyd is on the form of his career. He came really from Pretoni into this indoor event using different horses as well. But these guys, you've got the Max Verstappen out here. He is the young gun. He's bred to this. His family have been doing it. His grandfather was also called Bram, and he was the first of the family to drive internationally. His sisters, Bram's sisters, Jeanette, Leanne, Edith, they are all international event riders themselves, and Leanne is here helping Bram. He said last weekend how much Leanne was keeping him. And these horses, they love the beat of the music. You'll find their footfall in the rhythm. There we go. Just look at those feet move, all those legs. It's like a forest of legs in this amazing sequence. He's got 4 to add, but don't forget this is only Bram's second outing this season. For Boyd, it's his 5th. That's the difference. What we need to work out by the time we get to the final in Bordeaux, who has played the right strategy this year.
It is scored to around 154.10, but it is a new leader.
154.10. So just goes to show how competitive Chester was. He's really, really raised his game. Bram, 154.1. So it's all to play for. This is much tighter. I'm sure the drivers and their horses really enjoy having this prelim round here in London to bring them into competition 1. These horses are all sharp. They've been in here before. Don't forget, we do have a different course. Yesterday was a very fast and flowing course, so Jerome has had to design 2 different courses, about 800 meters or so in total, and we saw a real difference, a much bigger arena and a much longer course. It was about 150 meters longer in Geneva, and that asked something different for these horses. When you've got a more condensed course, when you've got the horses having to be really springing on their hooks, really able to turn those fast bits of adrenaline impulsion to go fast, and then they have to come back. It was much more about fast running in Geneva. Here in London, in this wonderful ExCel arena, we need subtle, active horses, obedient and keen. And Cousteronde, a former World Cup champion, Cousteronde, he is one of the most decorated drivers, just been on the gold medal winning team in Pretoni for the Dutch. So Cousteronde, again, more Lipizzana's. He's got the darker horse up front there, and he is Mr. Speed. He is such a brilliant marathon specialist as well, and similar sorts of skills needed. You need to be bold, you need to be brave, you have to have absolute trust and communication with your horses. And even if one horse might be having a bit of a spook, you've got the momentum of the 3 taking them over that bridge. Each course, each one asks different questions. And don't forget, those drivers that come back in here tomorrow, or if they're in the drive-off, they have to deal with their horses knowing the course. They're such intelligent animals, and they start to anticipate. So at the moment, this is fresh to them. This is the first time these horses have been asked to take these particular turns. By the time some of them do it for the 4th time in the drive-off tomorrow, they've got to be really careful that the horses don't anticipate, they don't cut in on the corners, and in some ways, even more skill, if we could ask for any more skill, is needed. So, we're seeing some fantastic driving today. The balls are staying on top, not too many penalties. Each time we do have some of them that really catch them out. Sometimes the horses' hooves just knock a ball, but Koos is really bringing his A game to London. Now, turning back on themselves. Now, there'll be lots of you watching this that might drive a single pony or a single horse or a pair or a tandem, and I can assure you from walking these obstacles as a carriage driver myself, these are tight. The gates are about 3.5 meters wide, but the turns, these drivers are asking their horses to make, that they are pulling off this levels of skill. It's quite remarkable. It never fails to amaze what they can do. They've taken driving to a new level with the World Cup. And as Boyd said yesterday in his interview, when he was receiving his prize, we came here 10 years ago to London, and my goodness, we've got one of the best crowds on the circuit here. They really get behind it. The roof was raised yesterday, and it will be again as we cheer them on. He's still clear. Look at that time. Through the oxer. That's what we call those four together, the box is technically called the oxer. One more to go. Is he going to be clear? If anyone can do it, he can. And the 1:52.89 and clear. Well, he has just sealed his place in the drive-off. Marie Durand, his wife, there on the back, and it's all smiles from Marie. You know, if Koos hasn't done a good round, you can read Marie's face, but that is very positive. She herself is a great horsewoman, and again, like the Chardons, they have this in their blood. They breed, they train, they do it through the generations, their children do it. And that's something that is so important. We talk about the four horses working here together as a team. That's a generic term we use as carriage drivers. Four in hand is technically what the FEI defines it as, but we call it a team of horses. But the word team is so important. It's not just about the driver. There's the backsteppers, the navigators behind you. And don't forget, as you just saw Marie ducking down there, what she would have been doing, she would have been turning a little dial on the back, and that helps just make an adjustment on the carriage, and it stops the back of the carriage swinging round. So you tighten it up when you're on the straights just to keep that carriage, because when you're going at great speed, you don't want the back of the carriage to flip out on you. So that the navigator, as well as having to have lightning reactions themselves, keep the driver right. Don't forget, the driver has got to drive so instinctively, and nobody does it better in his second season now that we've got coming in, and he's a speed merchant. Dries de Greek, he is one of the next generation Belgian drivers coming up alongside Glenn Geertz, and as a team they did very well on the outdoor World Four in Hand Championships. They came in bronze medal position, and Dries, very humble about his approach. He's very competitive, and he's a good horseman, but he says he's still learning. And he'd had a few sort of false starts so far this season, but in Geneva last weekend, the big open flowing course really suited his horses. He gets them very fit, and they are listening to him all the time. But he's somebody that always drives in a very, very positive way. And even if things might not be going his way, his lines are very precise. And one of the things you'll notice with Dries, he is so tight on those squares. Sometimes the carriage almost stops, but those horses are still moving, and that's how he gets these very tight lines. So he's asking those lead horses, taking his big loops, pinging them out again. Very precise so far, and it will be very interesting to see how his time compares to Koos, who has laid down the gauntlet. But at the moment, we're looking at 1:52, 1:54 as being the time to go to. But on they go, and you see just the angle that those horses are leaning in on, quite incredible. But the stability, and one of the things about these driving horses, and I spoke about this during the commentary a lot for the dressage in Bretoni, is the strength they need through their backs. We talk a lot about the power coming from behind with a horse, strong hops coming up through that engine. You want nice big fronts on the driving horse, you need plenty of room for a heart and lots of lung space. And the different conformation, the different breeding, gives you different aspects of that. But oh, now that's a rare mistake from Dries, but my goodness, he's recovered quickly. How quickly are they thinking and reacting? But these horses cover the ground, and sometimes with these warm blood horses, they've got a longer stretch on their legs. So with the Lipizzanas, the way they're put together, their conformation, they're what we call tight coupled. The legs might appear to be going faster, but they might not cover quite the same distance. Dries has got long stepping horses. If you look at how far out in front those front legs are going, it would be very interesting to put them over sort of a measuring mat and just see how many paces they're taking to cover the same amount of ground, and you gain so much more. So what looks fast might not clock up the quickest time, but that was a very good round. Let's just see, 1:60.34. So just a slight mistake in the second of the marathon style obstacles, and that's probably just cost him his drive-off place. He drove out of his skin yesterday, and very, very good driver. Second season. He made the finals in Leipzig last year, just had a very unlucky clip with his wheel on one of the cones in competition two. Just didn't quite make the drive off, handed the place to his compatriot Glenn Geertz, who ended up coming third behind Bram and Boyd. So this is really brewing up to be a fantastic Fantastic competition. Just look at all that harness. It does look quite complicated. We talk a lot about macrame or knitting or crochet. Obviously, you've got the reins coming back into the hand. They are buckled so that you've got both left sides and both right sides coming into the hand. We don't expect any one-handed driving here, although there probably is one man that could do the whole thing one-handed, and that is Boyd ExCel, the most successful carriage driver in the history of the sport. He came over to England about 30 years ago from Bega in New South Wales, and he knew back then that he was going to be a world champion. It seemed like a pipe dream, but he has done it again and again, and he can lead from the front and he can come from behind. And something about how he works means that the more pressure he is under, the better he drives. It is a very rare thing for Boyd to be beaten. He has raised the level. His training, his horses, as he said, he has the best horses on the circuit. He was talking to me just earlier about who he has in front. Banjo, left-hand side in the lead, is his really experienced horse. He said himself moments ago, best horse in the world, best horse on the circuit. He likes his horses to be thought of as the Glamourdales, as the Vallegros of the driving world, and he has got the best indoor team and the best outdoor team. That said, he has created them through training. He moved about 5 years ago to Valkenswaard in Holland so that he could be logistically and geographically much nearer where a lot of the driving action is, because there's a lot more events on continental Europe. So he's got a big base there, runs an event at Valkenswaard as well. And he's got a new horse in on the right-hand side. This is Maestoso Jupiter, who has actually been owned by several drivers of the four-in-hand drivers on the circuit. And he is bringing youth and keen and the exuberance of a younger mind now. That doesn't happen very often, commentators curse. But even though there's 4 penalties to add, that doesn't happen very often. He is nearly always fast enough to give himself a good enough margin. But you know what he'll do? He'll be cross, and that will make him put the foot down even harder. But these horses, they are so responsive. They only ever want to go forward. They absolutely love this job. Those two-wheelers behind just tucking themselves in, and watching them yesterday, look how supple his lead horses are. The one on the inside, little Jupiter there, coming round on the inside, keen, always dancing, always ready to go forward. Just the touch on the reins, and don't forget, as much as he's asking the inside horses to come round, he's letting out with the outside hand. That's just as an important part of these natural reflexes as a driver. One hand comes back, see the elbow coming back into his waist, the other one goes forward to straight. So that's how he's letting out, bringing them back. That's the steering. That's the steering wheel. Now let's see if he is going to be fast enough. If you were going to lay a late bet, you'd say yes, 152.89 that Koos laid down. So Koos has put the pressure on him, but as we say time and time again, pressure is fodder to this man. It is fuel to him. It's what he does. He's leaning in there, everybody leaning in, Emma and Hugh on the back. Well, was there ever any doubt? 148.02, so that's +4. So even with 1 down, he can still win the round. We often ask, what does it take to beat him? Well, Bram knows what it takes, but don't forget, Boyd is well into his season. He's well into his stride. He came out at Lyon. Yeah, just slight misjudgment, but quick, got them back. Just took it out. They're actually very lightweight, these elements. They do ping over really very easily. Now, the carriage itself weighs about 600 kilos. There's actually a rule change coming in next year because the gear and what we're using here in terms of the harness, the type of harness and the vehicle and how the drivers and the assistants are dressed, this is what we call marathon gear. So we're using a vehicle, those wheels, the widths are 125 centimeters. So just equate that to the space that they're going through with the cones. There's a little bit of a margin, so saying that the cones are about 2 meters wide, 125 are the wheels. So that gives you a little bit of swing, but not much, because my goodness, those balls can ping off so easily. Now, the design of the carriage has changed. I mentioned earlier that we started this eventing job with the old carriages. Now look where we are. I think the order is pretty much as we'd expect. Boyd up there in front, Koos next, and Bram, all super experienced. Chester just outside the running there. Dries de Greek, who did so well last night. He was way up there with them. Benjamin and then Daniel. So not much between Benjamin and Daniel, but that's the current standings. Leg 6 of 8. But the technical design, and Boyd's been at the forefront of this, and there we have it, the 3. We are running 3. So unlike the earlier legs this season, we've got the 3 top place drivers, 2 for the Netherlands and 1 for Australia. In fact, those are flags you really do see quite often in this world of top 4 in hand driving. So the configuration of the harness hasn't changed that much. You've still got the breast collar or the collar, that's what the horse pushes into to propel everything forward. The bridle, those blinkers over the eyes, they are there for the welfare of the horse. They protect the eyes, and particularly with the horses on the back, the wheel horses, where you've got the leader reins coming down the outside, they just keep those eyes safe, and they stop the horse being spooked by what it sees behind. So it's all there. Everything we do in this sport is for the betterment of the horse, to make sure that these top equine athletes are able to perform to the best of their ability. This is just a tiny percentage of what they do, seeing them here in an arena like this at the ExCel. All the travel. Don't forget, these horses are traveling thousands of miles as well. They have to be kept comfortable. They have to be able to come into the arenas round the back. We've got a vast area of stabling. There's the warm-up, all sorts of things. They have to have their own FEI passports, a bit like us. They need to have an identity. And since things changed with the UK and Europe, and we decided to leave, it's made transporting horses to and from Europe a little bit interesting. The vet checks and the protocols and things that we have to go through all changes. But there we have it, very Christmassy for many, many families all over the world. You haven't had a Christmas till you've come to Olympia, and although we're here at the ExCel Arena, I think it'll be known as Olympia for many years. And we had a wonderful Christmas show at the PAL Expo Arena just next to Geneva Airport this time last year. Sometimes they run on consecutive weekends, sometimes you've got a bit of a break. So what we do here, we've had Geneva, there's a break over Christmas, and then we go into the 7th leg, which will be in Mechelen. That's just after Christmas, and then we've got one more, the final leg, which will be the final decider as to who comes forward for Bordeaux. That is going to be in Leipzig, which was actually the venue for the final this year, and then coming back to Bordeaux, which is where we were able to sneak in the final just before the pandemic hit and all travel and everything as we knew it sort of shut down. We were able to have the final. So Bordeaux is one of the venues that we've had for the final many times. So well over the halfway point, and I think we could safely say at this stage Boyd is looking like the hot favourite. And whether the discussion has been that, has he started too soon, he's brought his horses out, has Bram done the right thing by starting halfway through the season, who knows? Who's got that crystal ball to see? But the Lewis Hamilton, Boyd, he has been consistently successful. The Max Verstappen, Bram Chardon, comes from generations of it. The family have a huge training establishment. And both Boyd and Bram and Koos and a lot of the drivers here competing at this level, they also do a lot of training. They go all over the world. They spend a lot of time in North America training. They have clinics and their knowledge. Boyd recently gave a seminar on bits, and that is such an important part of the driven turnout, making sure that the horse is happy in its mouth, that when you're asking a horse to do something, when that is your main means of communication with your driven animal, that you have the right equipment. And each horse's mouth is different, so you need to know the anatomy of your own horse's mouth in order to find the right mouthpiece, whether you use the bit strapped on further down, the rein strapped on, all down to what goes on at home. So looking full of concentration, the horses looking keen for more running. Coming back in. So Bram, who was just out of the drive-off last night, but that was fine. He knew he had a young horse in. He's driving Kendi, Favori Ferro. Those are his leaders. Dreef, Inca. Now, Inca is on his left-hand wheel, and he was saying Inca a lot in Geneva last weekend. He said there were a lot of left turns, but Inca is one of the anchors of his team. And then Drive Capitan, you'll often hear him, depending on the course, they'll be talking to different horses. Obviously, they're always encouraging with their voice, and they might be saying the horse's name to get them to really sharpen up or to get them to turn away. And he was saying Inca, Inca last weekend because he said lots of left turns. He needed Inca on Girone's course last weekend in Geneva to really be on it. But Girone has had to design a very different course and design too. So the times will be faster, not just because they've done this course before, but we drop out a couple of the gates. So they go through 1, 2, 3, 4, those pairs of cones as we call them in sequence. And and he's had an early ball. That is unusual. That is unusual. So that just means that he has to be driving on. So Bram has had an early ball there. And then coming back. So, yeah, just bouncing off a little bit. They really were on form last weekend, but here we go. But these guys, they come back from it. Any errors that are made, they use them to learn. And don't forget, the horses might be slightly anticipating, so we're dropping the F gate in this number 4. And you'll see on the clock, we are running on. So the time is a collective one between the 2 rounds. So although we've got the 60, 61, that is the time for this round, the collective time. So that does include any penalties. So although we call it a time, it is actually a total score that we get at the end of it. So 4 to add from that early knock and cone. You don't see Bram doing something like that, just a slight error, of course, but it's about these tight lines as well as the speed and the power and the consistency of going. Willing horses who are loving doing their job and then coming back into the hand, as we say. Taking up those loops tend to be concentrating on the direction of the leaders, slightly opposing the wheelers, holding them off, but the main contact is with those 2 leaders in front. Ears forward, which way they're going, down through D, and watch out, eagle eyes, they will be going through E, and then they can ping out. So all being well, the times will be a bit faster. Now, what you can do here is once you've been through a gate and an obstacle, once you've been through A, you can drive back through it as many times as you like. But until you've, what we say, broken the gates, you've driven the whole turnout through it in sequence, you mustn't go through it. You must never drive through D before B. But once you have done, you can drive through it forward or backwards. And this is the skill of these drivers. They only have about 15 minutes beforehand to walk the course, and they have to decide all their options. And there we go. That's from Bram. 4 to add. 149 points. Oh, with 8 to add. So another late ball. 157.6. So that's 311.70. 311.70. So you can just, bit of a shake of the head from Bram. But the point is how the competition runs. We call this competition 1. It's always run over 2 days. Sometimes there's a day in between. What happens today will determine the running order for tomorrow. So Bram will be in the top 3 because he's made the drive off. So he'll be one of the last to go in tomorrow's competition, which is at about 6 o'clock on Saturday. We will be bringing you that live coverage as well on the streaming service. So in next, Koos, who was very impressive last night. So far, seems to be having a very consistent London. Drove a brilliant marathon in Pretoni. But don't forget, the majority of the drivers who are competing at this level use a different team. They might have odd horses they use for the indoor and the outdoor circuit, but most of the time they're running different teams. And in a World Championship year, when the World Championships were at the end of September, and then they had to quickly get ready for Lyon, it was a very quick turnaround. So to get the horses ready, this is where you need your team on the ground, your team of people, making sure everyone's okay. Down through 2, so that's a nice long run, and that's gone again. So interesting, same ball that Bram knocked. And Jerome will say he is somebody that designs a course by instinct and by feel. Joseph Mittendorf, who designed the obstacles for Pretoni at the World Championships just outside Rome, he was somebody that designed very technical drawings. They looked like works of art to start off with. They were like spider's webs on the page, and then they came out, and then they grew into 3D objects with the wood and on the ground. Here, Jerome says he feels where he wants to put the cones. He's somebody that's been doing this for a long time. He's also a technical delegate. His daughter also drives. She did very well in the World Singles Championships recently in France. So just out to 5, that is a tight turn. Don't forget they have dropped F in obstacle number 4, and in number 8, the second of the marathon obstacles, they've dropped E. So the times will be quicker because they're just shaving off a few seconds by having to make a few less turns. So coming back in on themselves. Very rarely are you able to make turns on the same rein. If you're ever walking an obstacle, and bearing in mind if you're doing this outdoors, they're probably a little bit bigger, you may want to find yourself making turns on what we say the same rein, because it keeps up the momentum. And what it means is that every time you change rein, you go from the left to right, you ask the horses, you lose milliseconds. So if you can keep going on the same flow, on the same rein, going in the same direction, it can be faster. Sometimes you're quicker to sweep out like Koos did and take a big arc, but you can gain momentum. Sometimes it's quicker to take a tighter line. Only you as the driver know. Only that navigator behind you, who may be your wife, your son, your daughter, your best friend, your sponsor, whomever it may be, the trust you have to have between them. Down through this Oxer, number 11, just in front of this bridge here in London. And coming round, number 12, Koos Durand, 4 to add, 1, 3, 8.3, 9, 2, 95. We'll just get that up again for you to 95.28. So that puts him just ahead of Bram. So you'll see there the time for this round plus round number 1. So it could just be time. There could be some penalty balls in there as well. So here on competition 1, it's all a collective. Tomorrow when we have the drive off, we will start from 0. So slight difference between the 2 days. There won't be a change in course. The course that they ran over yesterday for the prelim round, that was a different course. And Koos just halting there. These horses are fit. They recover very well. Just imagine what it's like running flat out for 800 to 900 meters and then stopping, and how long it would take you to get your puff back. But these are fit horses, and we are always amazed by these horses. They go with all this adrenaline and all this speed, and then they will come back here in a few minutes' time and just stand stock still amidst the cheers and the music and the light. The training is brilliant. Banjok, Barney, Mad Max and Jupiter, Nimrod, those are the entered horses. Obviously he's only driving 4 of them, but they do always travel with what we call the spare, just in case anything happens. Sometimes they don't travel well. They're like us, they can get a little bit travel sick. Sometimes you just need that spare horse. And as Bram did last week in Geneva, he substituted a horse for the prize giving because one of them doesn't like it. And so we are off. So the last competitor in the drive off here in London. Competition 1, the 6th leg, and does he leave the ball on top? So Koos and Bram knocked that ball. Boyd has left it on top. Over the bridge, listen to those 14 shod feet, clatter clatter over, just creates a wonderful atmosphere here in the arena. And then they come back into the hand, and this is what only time and training and belief and skill takes. You need the right horses. We talk a lot about the conformation of horses. They need to be put together. This is why certain breeds are popular for certain disciplines. We saw a lot of warm bloods being used in Pretonia at the World Championships. Here on the indoor circuit, sometimes more pony-like, shorter coupled, more power, deeper second thighs, so they can ping forward. Think about what somebody like Ben Johnson was built like, or Linford Christie. When it comes to sprinting, you want to be able to have that muscle depth, the great muscles, great skeletons, and that's what we want in these horses. We're looking for just the same sort of qualities. And then it's fitness and it's training, it's regimes, it's routine, it's having varied. You don't want to be doing the same thing. They don't want to be in arenas just like us. They get arena sour. They have varied training. I spoke a lot about them working through water, and that, like swimming, supports the muscles. It's a great way, not just for rehab, but for really good sound training, something that certainly in the UK we're starting to use a lot more. So far, clear. And he had that unusual gate down in round one, the first round. So, and he's out, and he's out. So 1:04 and 5. Look at the collective score. He had 4 into out from the first time round. So far a 0 on there. Nothing to add. Time to beat, well, collective to beat is 2:95.28. It looks like he's going to do it, and he's going to do it with the most enormous margin. I'm writing down a 2, I'm writing down an 8, and we don't even get to 9. That was incredible. It just goes to show that time and time again he can come out and do it. 2:82.85. That is incredible. So, as Nick, the commentator, has just said to the audience, he has been unbeaten here on the World Cup driving. It used to be called extreme driving before it became part of the World Cup series, and he has never been beaten. That's an incredible, incredible record. So what does he do? A lot of us who have known him for a long time, we analyse why his performance is so much better. His training, the groundwork, the homework he does at home, his hunger. There is no doubt there is a huge amount of talent there. The belief that he has that he is the best in the world and his horses are the best in the world. He wants his horses, his driven horses, compared to Vallegros, to Glamourdales, to Milton, to all the great horses that we've ever known, to Ginny Lang's Priceless, to Murphy himself. Think of those iconic names that we think of in other disciplines, and Boyd wants his horses thought of like that, and so they should be. Because there's 4, because there's not 1, perhaps we lose sight of their brilliance. Don't forget all the many, many hours and days that have gone into even deciding if the horse is going to be suitable for the team, which position they're going to go in. And there we have the final lineup. So those first 3 drivers, they went into it. Boyd ExCel in front, and just look at those margins. Quite incredible. 2:82.85. And then Koos, his nearest challenger, 2:95.28. Bram Chardon, 3:11.70. He will be happy to be in the top 3. He's still warming up, but he is our reigning champion. Chester, really getting better all the time, in 4th position today, 1:58.44. Don't forget, for these last 4 drivers, this is just 1 round that we're counting. Dries de Greek, not quite as sharp as he was last night, but don't discount him. He will be back tomorrow. He will be analysing this round, 1:60.34. Benjamin Alioud from France, 1:70.51. And Dan Laprousse representing the home nation. Just great to have Dan here. He is one of our big characters in driving, a tremendous horseman, and actually he and the family are providing some of the main ring entertainment here at ExCel. So don't forget to tune in. We are the opening act on Saturday evening, and here in the arena the party are just very quickly dismantling it so we can just have our prize giving. So we must always pay huge thanks to everybody behind this. Obviously we talk a lot about the drivers and the horses and the back steps, but everybody that's involved in this, from the production crews to all the boys and girls and ladies and gents who are out there very quickly and efficiently. It's a matter of minutes driving away there. Benjamin just talking to his new team. Don't forget how important the voice commands are. And interestingly, if you ever buy a horse, say a lot of us have horses that come from places like Hungary, it's sometimes interesting to learn what sort of commands that they've been spoken to. Not every horse speaks English, so these are all considerations. The sentiments are the same. That was Chester, very focused. Bram Chardon there, no mistaking his horses, working so well, so keen. You need these bold, brave leaders. You're asking big questions of them, and every time they come up, Koos, one of the nicest guys on the circuit, such a softly spoken, gentle sort of character outside, and yeah, unusual sight there, but you know what, doesn't stop him. He still comes back and obliterates the opposition. He is on such great form. Bram there just coming round. So what these drivers will all do is go back and watch the video footage, because they will really be working on this course. This is the same set of gates, although the layout was very similar yesterday. We had a completely different sequence. they will be looking at this, they will be analysing their performance, they'll be thinking, where were our strengths, where were our weaknesses? They might have horses that turn better on the left or on the right. Drivers, if you learn to drive in a traditional sort of way, you're often left-hand dominant, because a lot of us learn to drive with our left hand. So it's very important as a driver that you have an awareness of where you are, and in they come. And this is always such a magical moment, and the production teams behind the music. And Bram, as Nick has just told everyone here, first time here in London, but focusing his season on the second half. He and his father, the great Ijsbrand Chardon, they've been sharing a couple of horses. Don't forget, between them, they are both competing in the same family at top level, indoor and outdoor. And we're not just talking about 2 teams, we're not just talking about 8 horses, we're not just talking about 16 horses here. They have loads and loads of horses. It's a constant rolling training, working out which horses are going to be best. So it's a big operation. So, and also when they've got a big business to be keeping going at home for everyone to be away at the same time, but lots of support. And here is Boyd, Emma Olsen, his top competition groom. She comes with him to all the competitions, and his great friend and supporter there on the back, Hugh Scott Barrett. Hugh is really keen on keeping himself fit to make sure that he can do the job that's needed of him on that bottom step. And the man from Bega in New South Wales, who dared to dream that he was going to be the world's best, has shown us yet again that he is, and paying tribute to his wonderful leader horses. Banjock on the left-hand side, near side as we call it in old-fashioned terms. 19 now, and just think, that's a 19-year-old horse. Think about that in terms of animal years, and he is absolutely still at his peak. He's been doing this for a long time, and something in their regime at home keeps this horse really fit. And there we have Nick Collins there. Nick, who is representing his firm, Martin Collins, here, and I've watched Nick all morning. He's not just here as MD, he's had barrow loads of surface, just getting everything ready. He's managing all the operations. So Nick Collins there is presenting Boyd with his winning bottle of something, and he's going to be sitting up on, or standing up on the carriage. There's not a lot of sitting that goes down on these carriages. Just developed and developed over the years, so that you've got these different handles on the back. The old carriages never used to have this. You used to have to hang on for dear life and just hope that you could stay on, because you really do get quite penalised if a groom comes off the back. So you want to keep them on, but the whole thing engineered for this job. You've got those lovely padded breast collars there. They have to sit just above the point of the shoulder, but also not be constricting the windpipe at all. And particularly with this FEI World Cup driving, you want as much oxygen getting down to those horses' lungs as possible. Just like us, the fitter they are, the more oxygen can flow in their blood, the more can get into their cells. Very similar sort of thing. All got the boots on there just to protect them. That is to protect those feet, just to make sure that nothing gets caught. And Boyd and the drivers, as they always do, absolutely understand the importance of keeping the crowd entertained. This is a family show, and oh, look at that, just made her day. What an amazing moment for that little girl. She's not going to forget that. Oh, 2 of them, they've got their rosettes. It happened to my children some years ago, and I did say to them, you're going to have to work very hard to really earn one of those rosettes. They were pretty blown away by some of the dressage. Seeing Lottie Fry and Glamourdale in here in the arena, to be up close to such an amazing horse. But the driving never disappoints. It's become such a firm favourite with the crowd, and we are so delighted that a lot of these drivers who are based over on continental Europe still come over. Chester, who's based in Florida, he's making sure that he's coming over here for this incredible circuit. Only the top 10 get to come along, and then every so often the organising committee, as we call them, from the local event, they are able to invite one of their national drivers. So that's why Dan gets here, and we had it in Stockholm earlier in the season when Fredrik Persson was able to compete as well. Now this is what we call the showboating, and this is not something you should try at home unless you really know what you're doing. And this See, Bram, you'll just notice if you're eagle-eyed, he's popped his young horse in. So one of the reasons you can tell that a grey horse is a bit younger is because they've still got this sort of steely roan colour. That horse will probably turn white eventually, but he doesn't want to blow the mind of his young horse. So you've got the two pros here. You've got Boyd and Bram. Do not try this at home, I beg you. Even if you're a really proficient driver, how close these guys get to each other. The margins are so tight, and they come back. Look at that. 0 to 0 to 60 and back again. Just incredible. And the crowd here loving every minute. Look at Boyd's wheeler going, come on, Dad, let me at it. They know what it is, and they have got to go galloping at full pelt down the chute into the collecting ring. And well done to Coos, a brilliant second here in London. So don't forget, we will be back here tomorrow bringing you the round that will count towards the rankings, and I think we can say quite safely Boyd goes in as favourite. Will he add another 10? He can't do it this time, he's the wildcard entry, so he will not be adding his ranking points to this season. So this means that somebody else, whomever comes second, could get those 10 points. Tune in to see. And the lights come down, and that has been an amazing event. Here in London, competition one of the 6th leg of the 2022-23 FEI Driving World Cup Series.
This is the place to be. All these dogs there have got a real community there. There's something special, so many stories. There are rugby tails everywhere you look around the ends.
What a competition we have around the corner here. So many adorable golden retrievers. I can't understand that. The famous dog agility, thanks to Skinner's pet foods, have been part of our magic since 1979 in the London International Horse Show. And of course, Crufts is the world's greatest dog show. 25,000 dogs, 160,000 people in March 20.